now. Like, no,
Okay.
thanks for letting me know. I just turned on the recording. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Yeah, so that is it. And well, now let's go back to our screen. And yes, I need to log into my phone. There we go. Let's refresh the companion screen. And yeah, it's taking a little while to refresh. There we go. And now I click next, 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 next. And now when I click next, nothing happens. Yes. And that is exactly how we want the app to behave. Okay.
Okay.
So now we don't get that error because we are checking and checking before we actually show the image. All right. So this is part one. And what we'll do now is we'll implement, we can only go forward, right? So we will also implement a button. So we can go backwards and forwards. All right. So I'll stick with the same, same app and just modify it to add another button. So I'll grab a button and drag and drop it here. And this one, I'm going to call it previous button. All right. And actually, let's put them in a horizontal arrangement. So they look a little better. Let's put them next to each other. So we'll go to the layout drawer in designer and pick a horizontal arrangement and drag and drop it there. And in case this happens, the buttons have disappeared just because they are because of the limitation of the height of the screen. We can just turn an element invisible. So I clicked on image. It's taking up most of the space here. So we can't see the buttons. So I'm just going to make it invisible. And now here are the buttons. And I'm just going to drag and drop them into the horizontal arrangement. Yeah, there we go. Actually, previous should be to the left, right? Okay. And also change the text that is showing on the button. So the previous button, let me go to the previous button, and I'm going to make it show a left arrow. That looks reasonably like a left arrow. Yeah. And the next button, I'm going to make it look like a right arrow. Small cosmetic changes. Yes, and now I can go back to image and turn it visible again. All right, so there we are, right? Now we already have coded the next button. All we'll be doing is coding a previous button. So then we can go back and forth in our slideshow. Makes sense? Yes, so we are back here from where we left off, and we coded the next button, and the code for the previous button will look very much similar, right? So why don't we just go ahead and duplicate this code and then make the changes that we need, okay? So the moment I duplicate the code, you see there is an error. There are two errors because, yes, you cannot have two blocks of code doing the exact same, the same thing, right? So yes, so these errors are nothing to be concerned about. They'll go away as we modify the duplicate copy that we just made. And so the first change we're going to make is that this is with reference to the previous button. So in the event handler, I'm going to click on the drop-down menu where it says next button and select previous button. And now you see the errors have gone, right? But our work is not yet done because the logic here is slightly different. So the next button increases the global index by 1. What should the previous button do? So this part here, where we were increasing the global index by 1, the previous button should do the exact opposite, right? So it should decrease the global index by 1, right? And we could go to the mat drawer and pick the block for minus instead of plus, or we can just add -1, which is the same thing. So that's one change we need to make, all right? And is there any other change that we need to make? So let's think this through. So as we keep clicking the previous button, let's say we are starting from the very end of the slideshow. So we are on slide number 4, and then we go to 3 and 2 and 1. And if we click, then it's going to go to, the index is going to go to 0, right? So we can, that's not going to help us. That's going to give us an error. For the sake of argument, let's just see that in action. Okay. Now here we go. So here are both my buttons. So let me use the next button, which is already implemented. Yes, I am touching the right arrow with my finger and it's moving forward. And now I'm at the last slide and nothing happens, right? That's exactly what we programmed it to do. Now let me click on the left arrow. Okay. Yeah, so nothing's happening because, yes, we still left the if then else there. So let's do this. Okay, let's take the if then else out and we'll come back to it later. Go to global index -1. Okay. And now when I click on the left arrow, now it's taking me back to the first slide. And now I'm on the first slide and I click and here the error is back. Yes. Because when I reached the number 1 and I decremented 1 by 1, it became 0 and there's no item in the list at index 0. In fact, 0 is not even a legitimate index for a list, right? And now we know how to handle this. We know that there is a conditional involved and we just need to think about what should we be testing in the conditional. So when we were advancing, we checked to see that the global index is not equal to or greater than the length of the list. In other words, as long as the global index, as long as the index, the current index, was less than the length of the list, we were okay to increment it. Now we want to check that it is greater than 0, greater than 1, right? So as long as it is greater than 1, because 1 is our first slide, we can keep decrementing it. We can keep decrementing it. Once it is 1, once it is equal to 1, then decrementing it is just going to make it 0, and that's going to give us that error. Makes sense? Yeah. So I can keep this if else. I want to check that the index, the current index is always greater than 1. So I don't need this anymore. I'm going to delete it. I don't need the length of the list anymore. And I'm just going to put 1 there. Okay. And if, did I get rid of, oh yeah, there it is. Now let's put, moving the code around. Yeah, so now I have the test implemented. Yes, let's make sure that we are comfortable with the logic. So each time I click the previous button, it will first check that we haven't already reached the first slide, right? That the current slide is greater than 1, which means we haven't reached the first slide yet. And if that is the case, then it will decrement the index by 1, which is the same as adding -1. And then it will show that picture. So now both the forward and the reverse buttons should work, right? So let me bring up the app again here. Yeah, here we go. Taking a little while to refresh over here. There we go. Something came up. Oh, I don't know. Okay, there we go. And now let's go forward, 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 forward. And now if I click forward, nothing happens. That's exactly how we want. And now we can go back, 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 and nothing happens. Yeah. And so we've pretty much got our slideshow. Yeah. And there's one more feature that we'll implement. So, which is that when we reach the last slide, yeah, we want to loop back to the first slide. Okay. So this means that we again need to slightly modify the event handler for the next button. Yeah, the previous button will leave it as it is. Once we scroll back to slide number 1, that's it. But once we reach the last slide, once we have moved forward and advanced the slide deck to the last slide, we want to loop back to slide number 1. So we'll change this if then else statement to, we'll change this if then statement and we'll give it another branch, right? Which is, yeah, so what I've done is I've clicked on this little blue settings icon And that brings up this, you know what, let me make this full screen. Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah. I clicked on this little blue settings icon and it gives me this else, if, and else. And this is one way to add another branch to the if then statement, to this conditional test. We could also just get rid of it, go to the controls drawer and grab the one that we want, right? Do we want an if then else? So one branch, two branch, three branch. We could pick it from here, or we can add any number of branches or configure the number of branches that we want from this settings icon. Yeah. And we could actually add any number that we want. Yeah, so it is completely customizable. But we need only one additional branch, because what we're going to do is, if it is less than the length of the list, yeah, so as long as we haven't reached the last slide, we will keep incrementing. But once we reach the last slide, what will we do then? Well, then we will reset it to slide number 1. Okay, so we'll just implement that in here. So if the current slide index is less than the length of the list, same as before, just keep incrementing. But once it is equal to the length of the list, right, then reset it instead of incrementing it, because there's no remaining slide to go forward to advance to. Just go back to slide number 1. Okay, so else if, I'm just going to cut and paste this one. Okay, duplicate. Else if, oh, not this one, sorry, that's the wrong one. Set global index to, what did I do here? Yeah, here we go. I don't need that. Yeah, what I want to do is I'm going to duplicate this one and else if it is equal to length of the list, right? That means we have reached the last slide. Then what do we want to do? We want to set it to 1. So again, I'm duplicating code from before, and instead of incrementing by 1, we'll just set it to 1. Makes sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so let's just satisfy ourselves that the logic is correct. I click on the next button. As long as we have not reached the last slide, increase, 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 go to the next slide, next slide, next slide. And once I reach the last slide, which is when the index is equal to the length of the list, then reset the index to 1. Okay. And so what this should do is now should allow us to go back, circle back to the first slide from the last slide. Let's go back to, oh, it has disconnected. Okay, so need to reconnect to the AI companion. Need to scan the QR code one more time. There we go. So since it disconnected, I need to close this and launch the AI companion app, scan the QR code. Scanning the code now. Screen is in the way. Okay, here we go. Scan the code. Yeah, there it is. And now forward, 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 forward. And we are back to the first slide. So looking back. Okay. And of course, the back. All right. So yeah, again, forward, 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 back to slide number 1. I'll keep going one more time. And now let's make sure that the previous button is still working as expected. Yeah, I'm on the first slide, previous, nothing happened. All right, so all good. All right. The buttons are a bit small, so occasionally I'm clicking and hitting the wrong one, but yeah. All right. So that was the first part of today. And would you like to do a little quiz before we get into the 2 remaining practice problems, or should we go to the practice problems?
We can go to the practice problems. Yeah.
Okay.
So we won't lose any time.
Okay, let's do that. All right. So the next practice problem will be to practice iterating over a list. And once we've done these, you can modify these to also work with dictionaries and play around with the CRUD operations for dictionaries. And remember CRUD operations. So CRUD stands for, the acronym CRUD has 4 letters: C, R, U, D. Create, how do you create data? Retrieve, how do you get it out? Update, how do you change data that's already in there? And then how do you delete or remove records that we no longer need? And we talk about CRUD typically in the context of a database. It's also handy to talk about CRUD in the context of any data structure like a dictionary or a list. So in the next exercise, we'll just keep practicing a little more with getting data in and out of lists. Okay. So let me go back to my project. So this part is done, and this is the part to display a list. So we'll start by just displaying a list, and let's see how this app works. So anytime I say refresh companion screen, it actually takes me back to my phone and then shows the app there. And what happens when I press show? Yeah, some list has come up. Oh, this is a list of all the classmates of my little one. Yeah. So we have Nora, Noel, Quinn, Caitlin. Yeah, all wonderful 6-year-olds. And okay. And what we'll do is we'll practice. So when we work with a list, the list is a data structure. And it is a data structure is a way to structure data, as the name indicates. And when we want to see this data structure, when we want to view it, say in a text label or in some other way, we want to convert it into a block of text. Okay. And so what we'll do is in this practice problem, we'll see how to convert a list to a block of text. And that is what we were doing when we were showing the list here, because a data structure, we cannot show it or should not show it as it is, as is. One moment. Where did the app go? Okay, disconnected. So this keeps happening from time to time. Let me reconnect. Disconnect. Okay, there we go. Phone screen mirroring, start now. Yeah, there we go. Now, do I have to do this again? No, here it is. Just give me a moment to get the phone back. Yeah. Start mirroring. There we go. And our companion disconnected. All right. AI companion. Back to, okay, it's still there. That's good. Go back to scan the QR code. And it'll come up in just a moment. Yeah, it's coming up. Color changed for some reason. Jaundice looking a bit yellow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Doesn't change.
It got sick, all of it.
It got sick.
Got real sick.
Yeah. So when I press this show button, this list is coming up, that is text, right? So we'll write a small procedure to take all the contents of this list and convert these children's names and convert them into one paragraph of text that it can show in a text label. Okay. And so as before, I'm going to move this to the backpack. It's funny, isn't it? Changing colors and all that. Yeah. So, okay, here we go. And then get rid of this as well. Yeah, and so this is going to give us practice writing a procedure to iterate over the list and then convert it into text. And so clearly this step is driven by clicking the button. So let's first go to the button and grab the click event. And in the event handler, we'll simply put a procedure to set text label. So this app just has a label and a button, right? And we will set the label to text. So we want the text property of the label. And where is the text property of the label? Somewhere.
Right there.
You see it? Ah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, there. Thank you. So here it is. And we'll set it to whatever is the result of a procedure. So now let's write the procedure. And this is a procedure that accepts an input and returns an output. So again, just a reminder, there are procedures that will just run the code that the blocks of code that we put in the procedure as we define it. And there are procedures that will take inputs and return outputs. And the one that says result is the one that returns an output. And this output is what we'll plug into the text property of the label a little later. Yes, so first let's write the procedure. And so let's call it flatten list. Okay, flatten. So in computer programming, when we say flatten, we typically refer to taking a data structure, any data structure. It could be a list, it could be a dictionary, it could be a dictionary of dictionaries, as we encountered in on day 7 when we build the app. Flatten means just convert it into text, like a document, just a document. So you can cut and paste it and stick it into a Word document, right? For example, a word processor. Yeah, so that's what is flatten. And we are flattening what? A list. So it's got to take an input, right? And that input, we'll just call it a list, whatever we want, right? We'll just call it a list. And what's going to happen is we're going to go over every item in this list. So what do you think it takes to go over each item of a list? So if we go to the controls drawer, we find the for loops. Yeah, and we have one that says for each item in a list. So this looks like this will help us automate the process of going through each item in the list one by one. You also have other for loops that go over a series of numbers, integers, from, to, and by. Yes, so this example here will iterate through numbers. So this is, what do we mean by iteration? So we refer to the process of going through a series of items, typically items in a list, as iteration. And so this for each number will iterate over numbers from 1 to 5 in steps of 1. And we can change this and customize it for our needs. When we are dealing with dictionaries, we are talking about keys instead of index values, and each key has a value associated with it. So there is also a for loop for iterating over every key in a dictionary. So you have all these different flavors of for loops that are so interesting and so handy when it comes to working with these data structures. So the most appropriate one, since we are working with a list, is going to be, and I'm sure you can guess, is the one for each item in a list, right? And so which list? So let's tell it that this is the list. I've called it daughter's friends. I did not delete the list because I do not want to type information over and over. So I left the list, but everything else we are coding from scratch. Yeah. And so for each item in a list, this daughter's friends, yeah, it will do whatever we tell it to do. And what do we want it to do? Well, we want to take that item. That item is just text. You see, it's in quotes. You see that? And so that tells us it's text, right? And so we want to take that text, and we want to, as we go item by item, we want to keep sticking the new item, that block of text, on top of the old item, with the end of the line separating them. Yes, so each item will be on a new line. So in this for loop, what I want to do is I want to initialize a variable, right? I want to initialize a variable. I'm going to call it just notice, so since this procedure is supposed to work with any list, let's just call it, let's give it a generic name like flat list. And there's nothing here yet. There's nothing here yet. There's just a name, flat list. So what should we have here? We should have just empty text. There's nothing there, right? But we are telling the computer program that create a variable called flat list, and there's something in there. There's just an empty block of text, and we are going to start filling it now in this for loop. All right. And so in the for loop, as we receive an item, as we get an item from the list, what do we want to do? We want to add it. We want to add it to flat list, right? So get set keeps popping up over and over. So first I want to get what's in the flat list. And then I want to join the latest item to it. So let's go to the text menu. Let's get flat list, and whatever is the new item, just add it to that. So all this join is doing is it's taking the latest item from this for loop and sticking it next to the whatever is already in the flat list, right? So the first item will come to start with what's in the flat list, this here. And what is this here? This is nothing. This is an empty block of text, completely empty. Okay. And then the first item comes in, it's going to take this empty block and stick that item next to it. So flat list is updated. Now it has the first item in the list. And then the next item comes in, it's going to take that and stick it next to whatever is in the flat list, which is until now the first item. And then in this way, your flat list will keep growing, and it's going to have 1 item, 2 items, 3 items, 4 items next to each other, right? As the for loop iterates over all items. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what will happen here. And I think this is pretty much done, except that when we are done with this, we want to return flat list. And also the way the flatten list procedure, the way this block is set up, this doesn't fit in there, right? It doesn't fit in there. So that means there's something we need as an adapter to go between these two. And that adapter is this do, okay? So you see this bit over here, like a jigsaw puzzle, right? And so this piece doesn't fit in here, right? If we were to use the other procedure, this one, you say it would fit right here, yeah? But the one that returns a result has a different kind of an arrangement. So we need this do, and you'll see in a moment why we need that arrangement. So that is because, yeah, that is because whatever we are doing here, we need to be sure that we are returning a result. Okay, so whatever we do, there's got to be a result, and that's why you have this unusual arrangement here, which forces you to use this do adapter. So you will always be returning a result, even if that result is nothing. Okay. So what do we want to return? We want to now return our flat list. Okay, so there is an error here because I defined flat list as a local variable inside the do loop. So I'm going to have to change this a little bit. This is interesting. So this is interesting because it's kind of a puzzle. Now, how do I get the result out, and how do I get these pieces to match when they don't match? So actually, if I look at variables, I can also initialize a local variable and do the exact same thing as I was doing here. Yeah, I can initialize it with this block. Let me just put them next to each other for contrast. Okay. So you see this flat list that I was initializing here with this block, which doesn't fit here, right? I can initialize it with this block, which does fit in there, right? So what I'm going to have to do, so this is a good teaching moment because, you know, there are all these little puzzles built in that require figuring out, and that make this whole process very interesting. Yes. And now I have a piece, I've initialized a variable. It's still nothing, exactly as before, same name, same value. But this time I've used a piece that fits in there. And now I can stick the do in there. And now I can work with the flat list, and now I can return it. All right. Yeah, so the issue with a local variable is once I define a local variable, that variable is only known inside this code block. Okay. It's only known inside this code block. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that is why when I had the do outside and the local variable inside, then I could not return the result. Yeah. So I had to move things around to be able to do that. And now this is cool, right? And this will accept a list, which is this data structure. We'll pass, we still haven't passed it to the procedure, but when we use the procedure from the procedures drawer, here it is. Our brand new procedure is ready. Yeah. And we'll give it this list. All right. Wait a minute. That's not the list. Here, daughter strings. That is the list. There we go. We'll give it this list, and we'll take that list. It'll first create a block of empty text, and then it will just keep sticking these items next to each other, and then we'll get our flat list. And this is not done. Let's see how this works. All right, it's not done yet, but let's see how it works. A good time to test how it is doing. And for some reason, my phone is disconnecting. Give this one more try from the bad network, I think. Yeah, reconnect, redetect. If this, yeah, there it is. It's back. I was going to say, if it doesn't work, you go back to the emulator. All right. And now I'm going to have to reconnect. So AI companion and scan the QR code. I'm doing all that in the background. And it'll come.
I guess it goes to sleep, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The phone connection goes to sleep after a while.
Correct. That's right. It goes to sleep. That's exactly what's going on. And here it is. It's back. So I'm going to click on show. And there it is. There it is. Wow. Nora, Noel, Quill, Caitlin. But. It doesn't look like what we were seeing when I demonstrated the app at the beginning. Because the way we are joining these strings together, pieces of text string, we are not putting anything between them. We're just saying, take the next one and stick it next to the, what's already there. And then it just keeps accumulating next to each other. So it started with Nora, who is first on the list, then stuck Noel right next to Nora, then Quinn, then Caitlin. So we want to have a separator between these, right? And ideally, what we'd like to do is just have each name on its own line. So no problem. Let's go to the join block and let's make a small change. So just like with the for loop, as we were seeing earlier, we can click on the blue settings icon and we can customize it. And what we're going to do is we're going to customize the join block to accept one more little piece of information, which is text, of course. So go to the text drawer and grab, and I can put a space here, in which case the list will be separated by space. I could put a whole bunch of space, or I could put a new line, and a new line has a symbol /n. And when the computer sees /n, it understands, oh, what you mean is you want me to take the latest item and stick it next to whatever is already in this block of text, but put this on a new line, right? So that's what \n tells. And so when we now run this one more time, I have to refresh. Yeah, so when we run this one more time, oh, there we go. See, so that little change makes them now appear one.
Very, very nice. Could we also maybe just put a space, comma, space on that little block?
Absolutely. So let's do that right now, right? Yeah. So we could put, you mean like a new line and space, or just
just a sparser? It'll be on the same line, but they're separated by commas.
Separated by comma. So that's what I did. I went in there and put a comma and a space. Okay.
Yeah.
And now let's run this, and you'll see
what happened.
a list with just a comma. Okay. So Caitlin, Quinn, Noel, Nora. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right. So that was one part of this. And now what we'll do in the last part for today is, so we are showing a list that is already hard coded, but so that is the retrieve and update part of the operation. Retrieve mostly more than update. We'll also see how to add items to a list. All right. So what I'm going to do is first make a quick demo of how this works. Projects, my projects. Yeah, there we go. Open a slideshow. See the display a list. Is it this one? Let's just go ahead and code it. Yeah, record items in a list. There it is. Okay. So this one is slightly different, not a whole lot different from the previous one. And what this will do is, let me just get the connection back here. There we go. And let's just add, give me a name. Let's just add loads, right? I'm going to add that.
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay.
Sarah. Yeah.
There. All right. So I'll keep adding these names, and those names will appear on a list.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God. That's pretty cool.
That's cool, no? Yeah. So let's code it.
Yep.
So let's go back to our previous project and start from there. So display. So what we had to display a list. Now let's extend this to also be able to add items in the way I just showed. So I'm no longer going to need this list. So I'm just going to disable it. I'll just leave it there. We won't use it. And what I'll do here is I'll add a text box. So we can add new items to the list. Oh, by the way, this was okay. And I'll make this button, the show button, invisible. And I'll add a new button to add to list. Okay, so I'll just call it add to list. Just a moment. Add to list. Okay. Yeah. And so what we'll do now is we'll just modify this program to accept these new items in the list. And then as soon as we add a new item, it'll just show up in the text label where it says list to be defined. Okay. All right, so let's get coding. So we'll keep this code in here because we're going to probably reuse this procedure. And now it's all driven by this new button, right? Let me rename it to add button. And let me rename the previous one to show button. If I'm already using a button and I change its name, it doesn't matter. It will take care of updating the change in all the right places. Now what happens? So we'll start with the empty list, okay? Because we want to keep adding items to this list, right? So we'll create an empty list and we'll call it new friends. And when you go to the list drawer, we see that there is a make a list, which is if you know what you want to put in there already, which is what we used before for daughters. And now we'll just pick the create an empty list because the items in the list are still to be defined, but we want a list in place ready to accept those items. So we need to create an empty list. All right. And I usually put all the globals on the top. And then what we'll do is we'll disable this show button. We no longer need it. We'll go to the add button. We'll go to the click event of the add button. And what do we want to do here? Well, we want, when the add button is clicked, we want to take whatever is in the text box and we want to just put it into this list, new friends, right? So we're clearly going to have to get the list, whatever is in there, even if it is empty, and then we're going to have to set it. We know we're going to have to use these. So let's just grab these. And what we want to do is we want to know what's in the text box, right? What's in this text box. And so to get that, we go to the text box, and what property tells us what text is in the text box? It's this text property. Yes. And here is the getter and setter for the text property, and we want to get it this time. Okay, so we're going to take the getter for that. So here we have what's in the text box. And what I want to do is now I want to stick this into the list. So let's go to list and find a block for adding a new item to the list. So interestingly, there are multiple ways in which I can add an item to a list. And the simplest way is to just take a new item and stick it at the end of a list. And this is what this add items does. Okay. Now I want you to know that that's not the only way you can put things into a list. You can also say add a new item at this exact position. Just like we select an item from a position, we can also insert an item. Somewhere in here is a insert. Here it is, insert list item. We can insert an item at a specific index. And if there's nothing at that index, it will create, if let's say I want to add a new item at index 5 and my list is only 3 in length, it will automatically take care of expanding the length of the list, increasing the length of the list to accommodate that. So it will do that. And then I can also use this replace list item at a particular index. I can merge two lists using the append list to list. Yeah. So this one takes two lists and it just puts them together into one long list, which is different from sticking a list into a list, So we can have, when you add items to a list, if the item itself is a list, you will get a list inside a list. However, if you use append to list, then what you'll have is one list, yes, created from two lists. So there are so many functions, so many methods that list offers, yes, and over time one can have fun playing with using all of them. What we need for today is just to add one item to a list. So just stick it to the end of the list, and so we'll go with these add items to list. And which list? New friends. So here's our getter. And what item? Whatever's in the text box. So that goes there, right? And so that's done. And actually, I don't need the set method, right? Because I'm already passing it the list when I say add items to this list. Yes. And so it will not require a setter. And so that item appears there. And there's one more business I need to take care of, which is, okay, now the list has a new item in it. However, we want to see that, right? So we'll use our good friend flatten list to help us there. And so we'll call this procedure this time with new friends, right? And new friends just got updated. See? So we'll call this procedure to convert all that's in the list into a paragraph of text. And then we want to show that. So do we have a label already? Yes, we do. So we'll just use that label and set its text property, which by now we've used many times, to that flag. And we are done. And hopefully this serves the purpose. So phone, wake up, wake up, wake up. There we go. Yeah. Let's put Sarah add to list. And label text, and it didn't work. Well, we'll see why it didn't work in just a moment. Okay. We will see why it didn't work in just a moment. Am I adding the right one here? Yeah. So from the text, refresh the companion screen. It's already refreshed. Okay. Have I picked the right label? Yes. Flatten list. Yes. Add items to list. Item text box text. Give me just a moment, okay?
Okay.
So new friends is empty, and Add items to list. Just go back to list and make sure that things are being added there. Add items to list. Here's the list. This item. Yeah, so let's make this into a teaching moment and let's see how to debug when we hit a problem. So there's
Okay.
one additional component that we have called notifier.
Oh, great.
Grab notifier and drag and drop it to the screen. And it's not a visible component, but what it will do is it's very helpful for printing out there is what's in a data structure or what's the property of a particular component. So let's drag and drop a notifier here, and a notifier, when we call it, will show a pop-up window with what we ask it to show. So I've clicked on notifier, and what I want it to do is show me a dialog box which has a button. I think the one I want to use, message title and button, this one. Okay, that one. What I want to do is I just wanted to tell me, I'm going to call this debug, and the button, I'm just going to call it okay. What I want it to show me in the message is actually what's in the list. All right, so let's just grab new friends, stick it in there, and see. So now when I click on the button, add button, make sure it's the right button. Yeah. Now when I click on the button, it should take what's in the text box, add it to the list, and then show me that list. And then, yeah, then we can see whether, first of all, whether the list is updating. Okay. So let's go here. It's interesting. The notifier also did not pop up. Let me just close this and launch again. Going to AI Companion, scanning the QR code. All right. Here is it. Sharing is gone. There we go. It's back. Redetect. There we go. Okay, so I think this should do it.
What did it say?
What's that?
Oh, say, okay, maybe.
So it is adding to the list so that we know, right? So we've debugged that part of it.
Mhm.
So clearly the problem is not that it's not adding to the list. So this part is working okay. So the issue is probably with showing what's in the list here. So call to flatten list, and this is what we had done before, right? This is exactly what we had here. So let me enable that. Label text, flatten list, a list. Okay. This is a bit puzzling, isn't it? Is there something you see that is potentially Yep, keeps adding Sarah to the list, but isn't showing that. So
Is the same, is add the same thing as append? Adding,
Add items to a list.
add items to list.
Yeah, that's a good thought. However, you see what's happening is when I actually add to list using
button.
the notifier, it is actually adding to the list correctly. So the list is being correctly formed. So let me try a different
Oh,
name, Sarah. Okay.
okay, I get
So
it. All right.
say Sanjay there. Okay. And add that. So now you see the list you have Sanjay and it is added to the list correctly. Right.
But it's
So
not showing.
not showing.
Okay.
Right. It's actually the
Okay.
same code that we were using just a moment ago.
Oh, the
Interestingly,
one that was that one. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. The daughter's friends one, right? So it was showing. Oh, I think you know what? Flatten list. It does start from a blank slate. Interestingly, those names also are still showing up here, which should not be the case. Okay, so somewhere I got it. You see, sometimes these errors can be hard to detect, but I hard coded that list here. This should not be a specific list. It should be the list that I passed as a parameter to the function, right? So
Oh,
this is very
okay.
humbling.
You're not
Yeah.
you're
So it
not
is always,
you're
yeah,
not asking for the whole list. You're just asking for the parameter. Is that what?
correct, correct. We are not asking for this particular list, this specific list, right? In the procedure, we are passing that list each time, right? So we are telling it, work with whatever I send you. And so what I send you is going to be called, you're going to call it a list, right? And so it's got to work off that parameter. And instead, by leaving this hard coded, it was always working off this global variable. And you know, and the clue to that is it was actually showing that list here, right? So that was the debugging thing. So instead of that, it should work with whatever I pass it. And what I pass it is in this A list, right? And so earlier I was passing my daughter's friends. Now I'm passing new friends, right? So A list will always take whatever value I pass it. And so that wasn't happening before. All right, so let's make sure that now a better place with that and get to list. And there we go. Okay, so you're seeing the comma separated list. Okay, and if we wanted to, we could add another button to clear up that list, but give me another name.
Okay. Jill, Jill.
There we go. So add to list, and now you see Jill is added to the list. Okay.
Okay.
You see that?
Okay.
And
Yep.
now I can get rid of.
Okay. So you. So you were asking before the list of the global list of the friends I already had put in, and now it's just putting in a variable.
Yeah. Earlier it was in a variable, and I was using that exact list in the flatten list function. That was the mistake in implementation. Yeah. So a function
So
when I
you get the.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you get the item. You didn't get the daughter's list. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Right. So now it is whatever
you
item.
You joined.
You
joined the item. Okay. I'm sorry.
No problem. You're good. Yeah. So when a procedure, just to recap, when I pass a procedure, a parameter, it needs me to tell it which list to work with, right? Or what is the value of that parameter? I need to pass that value to that parameter. And so this is like a synonym, right? So when I made this procedure flatten list and I said, I will pass you a list to work with. And within the procedure, that list is always going to be called a list, right? A underscore list, right? Unfortunately, the mistake was, so inside the procedure, it should always be working with a list. So that's why I have a get a list and a set a list, right? So I should be using these to refer to whatever I passed into this function, right?
Mhm.
So instead of that, so this is called hard coding. So when I put this specific list in here, then it's actually doing nothing with the list that I passed to it. It's just using that hard-coded list every time, right? So,
Yes.
so that was the error. And if I had
Okay.
deleted this
Oh,
list,
thanks for explaining.
yeah, no problem. If I
Thank
had
you
deleted
for
this list,
explaining that. That's clear.
yeah,
That-
all right. So that is it. And now we can get rid of the notifier. And this was good, because programming is messy. Sometimes these kind of errors creep in and they can be hard to detect, and one can spend a fair amount of
Mhm.
time. You know, it's good to be armed with the right tools for debugging one's own code and
Mhm.
also somebody else's code when one works on bigger project. So they teach a introductory course in Python programming at MIT, and one whole session is devoted to debugging, and that has techniques like talking to a rubber duck and explaining your code to a rubber ducky, you know, and
Mhm.
to just detect what might be going wrong. Yeah, but one good thing to come out of this is we also learned how to use a notifier, because when we start printing out intermediate results, then we can start doing that investigative journey, right? Of saying, well, did it not append to the list? Is the error here? Okay, it is appending to the list correctly. So then the error must be in how we are showing the list. So let's go into the procedure where we do that. And then, you get these little clues, and that helps debug. And then you can keep putting the notifier, you can keep sticking the notifier in any place in the code to print out what to print out intermediate results, and you can compare those intermediate results shown by the notifier with what you expect to see. And when it is not what you expect to see, then you kind of have nailed down the root cause of your error. Does that make sense, Lutz?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, where did you get the notifier from?
sure. I'll
And
show you.
and
So it's in the user
what
interface.
was it in?
It's in
Oh,
the
it's in the user. Okay,
yeah, in the designer, in the user interface, and you can have
great.
a link at
Okay,
different places in the program.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And so this is what I had planned for today. We've covered all the items here. In the building the app, we use dictionary instead of a list, and you can work off these examples and replace a list with a dictionary and get some practice with those also. And with the conclusion of today's session, there are only two more sessions remaining. So in the next session is really the last app that I'll be showing. It is a app called Logo, based on a programming language called Logo that was invented by Seymour Papert from MIT, who put a lot of thought into how computer science and how programming should be taught. And so he created this little turtle. Now let me stop sharing so you can see. He created
Okay.
this little turtle, and the turtle is a graphic, and you use little buttons to click on the turtle to make it move and draw as it moves. And then the whole idea was you can draw manually, and you have a pen up and a pen down. And when you have the pen up, the turtle moves and doesn't draw anything. And when you have the pen down, the turtle moves, and as it moves, it draws on the canvas. So we will do that. The idea really was also how to automate drawings and make some beautiful patterns, repetitive patterns from simple repetitive elements, by putting the building blocks together into an automated script. So it's pretty interesting. This is how computer science was taught at MIT in the 1960s. And to this day, when we teach children a language like Python, we very often start with turtle
Mhm.
graphics and the equivalent in Python. So even to this day, that is how uh, the foundations of computer science are taught. So we'll be looking at
That's
that. Yeah, a lot of history. And then after that,
that
we'll be
sounds like
able
fun. It
it
really.
is. Yeah. In fact, do you want to see that turtle graphics? I'll show you just
Oh, okay, sure,
30 seconds.
sure.
Turtle.
I like that. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, let me put in this is on the same old Papert. Same old. Yeah, so this is, the iconic image of children playing. So this was the turtle, here. And this was in the 1960s. And do you see it drawing on the paper? And they're programming it with a very primitive computer over here. So this is where you press the buttons to make the turtle move and pen up and pen down. Oh, am I sharing my screen?
No, you're not
It's
sharing
not-
the screen yet. Yeah.
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 Here it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is how it was. And the actual turtle, has evolved over time. But yeah, here, this is a very early version of that. Okay. And
Oh.
yeah, even to this day, so the computers in those days were much different from the computers today. Yes, and yeah, here are some more recent examples of the kind of patterns that people create with turtle graphics. And mostly when we say turtle graphics, it is with just a graphical turtle. This is Seymour Papert. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Iconic figure. He is in many ways the inventor of artificial intelligence. He was very deeply interested in how to teach computer science to non-techie people, So yeah, and here are the kind of graphics that we can make with it, Like the whole, yeah, turtle graphics. Turtle graphics is what it's called. Okay, so that was that.
So you
And
need the turtle in order to get engaged in making the graphics?
yeah, there's two ways to do it really. There is the hardware turtle, like in this one. And yeah, so that hardware usually is, it has a wire, a tether that connects it to the computer. And so the more prevalent way to do it is using a graphical turtle. Right? So it's a small icon of a turtle that moves on the canvas.
Ah,
Yeah. So like in
okay.
the two apps that we built, the Pong app and the Mole Mash app, we
Mhm.
we explored how to use image sprites on a canvas. So what we'll be using is a small turtle sprite moving across the canvas. Okay,
That's cool.
for this course. I teach a advanced course also in that we actually use a physical turtle that has servo motors and wheels and pen up and down. And I
Mhm.
used it to teach about wireless communications between computers and devices. Yes, but for tomorrow we'll be using, for the next class, we'll be using a small graphics turtle like this one. Let's see.
Okay.
Mhm. All right,
Oh,
let's see.
that's gonna be nice. Very nice.
Yeah, thank you for your
I
interest.
had a question. I
Yeah.
sent you
Mhm.
I sent you a question about that. I was trying to get the recording for session 7 and 8. Is that possible for Nikki to
Absolutely.
send to put it in some location for us to be able to view it? Because I don't know where they put it, where they store it.
Absolutely. So let me show you where I put it. As soon as I get the recording, I put it on my blog and I'll share the link with
Oh,
you. Yeah. And you said day
okay.
7, right? So day 7 was 30th of December,
November.
30th of November. Was it
Yeah,
day?
right. And then no, December 7th. Yeah.
So December
Those,
7th, we had an incident where someone tried to hack into my computer, and
oh,
we did not have I did not proceed with the session. I closed it and I restarted it about 5 minutes later, and there was still someone there that we could not identify. So I just closed that session. So we did not have
oh,
a normal session on December 7th. We had some people trying to butt in and play mischief.
oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
why
So
today.
at least the
Uh,
November one.
yeah. But you were here for the US President's quiz, right? I remember. So, but that
Mm-hmm.
that is here. And yeah, here's the link. I can paste it in the chat right now,
Okay.
or I can email it to you.
Fantastic.
Let me close the on the Windows.
When you say you're gonna post it in the chat, okay. Yeah, or I was thinking that, or either in the classroom.
Let me post
if
it in
it-
the classroom too. Okay.
Okay,
Post it in the classroom as well.
okay. Oops. What other classes do you teach, Sanjay?
Yeah, so I teach a data science classes in Bayer to biologists there, and I'm
Oh,
teaching
okay.
a version of this class that you're in, which is so the data science class I teach at Bayer, so that is in Python and a programming language called R. So I teach machine learning and other parts of data science in that class. I also teach people how to program in Python, which is a prerequisite to doing data science in Python. And with young adults or younger children, like middle schoolers and others, I teach a version of this class. There's the version 1, which is there's the part 1, which is this one, and there's a part 2, which is more getting into artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, like building home automation, using App Inventor and other technologies. So I get more into that in part 2 of this App Inventor course. Yeah. So did you have somebody in mind when you asked that question?
Well, I was thinking about is there going to be a part 2 of this MIT App Inventor?
Yeah.
Are you going to continue it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
There will probably be one, but it will probably be around spring of next year.
Okay.
Spring of next year, and yeah, so that one I'll keep you posted as and when we are ready with that. Okay.
Okay.
So you are on the Google Classroom, and your email is there, right, Lutz?
Because I use 2 of them, and I noticed the one that I normally use for this class wasn't there. I'll give it to you. It's mlwellington@myfairpoint.net.
Okay, let me add you right now. ML Wellington.
Yeah,
My Wellpoint.
at myfairpoint.net.
Fairpoint.
MY fair FAIR point POINT.net.
I just sent you an invitation to join the classroom with that email.
Okay.
Did you
And
received it by any chance?
let me check.
Yeah.
I hope I don't lose you because we lost completely our internet.
Oh.
I'm just working on a hotspot right now.
Oh boy.
And it tells me that's a little bit unstable.
Okay.
And
No problem.
but the what let me send and receive. Our culvert frozen, and it froze the Cat5 culvert with the cable.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So right
Yeah,
now you're
so
calling the hotspot. Okay.
on the hotspot. Yeah. And
Well,
it doesn't have much. It only has 15 meg.
oh boy. Okay.
It's very.
Well, if you see my screen, you can see, did I type your email correctly? ML Wellington.
Okay, let me see. ML Wellington at myfairpoint.net. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
You got
Okay,
it.
that is correct, right? Okay. So that is good.
Mhm.
Then once you are able to accept it, then I can send you, yeah, notifications there as well. All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No
I
problem.
really appreciate that.
Yeah. No problem. Thanks for your interest. And I must say, I admire you for joining in today with a hot point, with a hotspot and all that, despite the difficulties you're having. So good on you for doing that. I'm really glad you were able to join today, Lutz.
It's been a tough, we lost our internet last Thursday morning.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was in a Zoom meeting and I lost it. So it's
Oh,
been tough to, you're so conditioned to use Wi-Fi and printing Wi-Fi and everything, and you just have to change everything.
yeah, I know.
You can just imagine what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We had a storm.
It's like, it's
Yeah.
scary.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
It's very scary.
it is. Yeah, true, true, true. Hope that gets sorted out soon for you. Okay.
The only thing we're gonna do is go satellite temporarily to see if the satellite works.